What is happening, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review what I anticipate is going to be one of the wildest flicks of 2023, Poor Things, the latest collaboration between director Yorgos Lanthimos and Emma Stone, adapted from the novel by Alistair Gray. And I caught the movie yesterday at a press screening here at the New York Film Festival, and luckily we had Mr. Lanthimos in attendance with some of his key collaborators on the film, like composer Jerskin Fendrix, who did an absolutely incredible job. But I won't beat around the bush. I'll just come out right and say it. I fucking love this movie, and I think it's a strong contender for a career high for both Lanthimos as well as Stone. But because it doesn't come out in the US until December 8th, I'm not going to give anything away. But I will say this is a work of unfettered imagination, just pure unbridled creativity. It's absolutely hysterical. It's intensely erotic. And it's basically one of those movies that's so wildly original and provocative that it makes the great majority of movies in 2023 seem really tame and really cautious and really irrelevant by comparison. And for my money, as an art form, cinema needs filmmakers that will occasionally take big, bold swings at topics and stories that might make some audience members squirm in their seats as they cry out in superficial outrage, and I suspect plenty of people out there are going to make up all kinds of reasons to be shocked by this movie. But for diehard movie freaks, and when I say diehard movie freaks, I mean people where their love of cinema and their love of great movies transcends every other concern, I suspect that this movie is going to put a lot of smiles on some very happy faces. But here is the official description from Wikipedia. Poor Things is a 2023 steampunk black comedy fantasy film directed by Yorgos Lanthimos from a screenplay by Tony McNamara and starring Emma Stone, Mark Ruffalo, Willem Dafoe, Rami Youssef, Christopher Abbott, and Jared Carmichael. Based on the 1992 novel of the same name by Alistair Gray, it focuses on a young Victorian woman who, after being crudely resurrected by a scientist following her suicide, runs off with a debauched lawyer to embark on an odyssey of self-discovery and sexual liberation. And this movie's been in the works for a long time. During the Q&A after the screening, Yorgos Lanthimos talked about how he sought out the rights for the book a long time ago. And so he went to Glasgow to meet with the author. And he and the author apparently just had this whirlwind tour of Glasgow, had a great time. And at the end of the tour, the author said, "You know what? I really liked your movie Dogtooth. You can make Poor Things." And this was before Yorgos Lanthimos had made any movies in English. And I'd have to double check to be sure, but I think The Lobster was his first movie in English back in 2015. Then obviously made a big splash with The Killing of a Sacred Deer and The Favorite. And I feel like Yorgos Lanthimos, his reputation just keeps growing and growing with each movie. And then people keep going back and discovering his Greek movies. Of all of his movies made in Greece, I've only seen Dogtooth, so I still need to do the deep dive on some of his earlier movies. But I have to say, it's just a genuine thrill seeing a director that I already liked and already admired just blatantly leveling up with this movie. I mean, there's so much about this movie. You're like, oh my God, like what might be the upper bound limit to his career? Like, how high could he soar? Because as a filmmaker, it seems like his craft and his ambition and his skill and his technique and his sensitivity as an artist, it all just seems to continue to grow. And as I was watching this movie yesterday with a big goofy grin on my face, I kept thinking to myself, in a weird way, this might be the best unofficial adaptation of the original novel Frankenstein that I've ever seen. And it's not Frankenstein at all, but it has a lot of overlap. But what most Frankenstein movies get wrong is that in the novel, the monster keeps evolving and changing and becoming wiser and more eloquent. And by the end of the novel, his brain is incredibly sophisticated. He's almost like a superhuman being in a lot of ways. And I feel like a lot of the movies just totally, completely disregard or overlook that aspect of the book. And the same holds true here with the story of Poor Things. And I must admit, I've never read the book, so I don't know how much of this movie is a departure from the book or a faithful adaptation. But we're treated to this genuinely deranged science fiction story that's deeply disturbing if you stop and think about the mechanics involved with bringing the character of Bella to life. But I think most audience members are going to be so delighted with the intoxicating imagery of the movie, they're not going to linger on the darker ingredients for long because they're going to be way too busy howling with laughter at Emma Stone's unhinged, spontaneous performance. Her eyes have always been incredibly expressive, but I think this movie in particular really showcases her range in ways that I think will genuinely surprise people who only know her from like Disney movies like Cruella. But much like Mary Shelley's novel from 200 years ago, her character never stops evolving and growing and has this genuinely insatiable lust for life that I found to be incredibly inspiring. But her journey of self-discovery, it's not your typical inspirational tale. It involves serious gluttony. I mean, yeah, food is a big part of this movie, massive quantities of alcohol, and what I can only describe as a whirlwind tour of sexual activity, plenty of violence on the side as well. Like basically all the things that I like to see in a movie. But what's truly amazing about this flick is how the audience through the character of Bella, we learn to see the world with fresh eyes. And admittedly, this is like a science fiction fantasy world that loosely borrows from our own. It feels Victorian in tone and flavor and morals, but this is a world of complete and total artifice created on a soundstage. It has more in common with like the adventures of Baron Munchausen than it does with our own world. And yet it's impossible not to share Bella's sense of wonder and awe and just her genuine lust for life as she sets out to discover basically everything the world contains. Like her curiosity knows no bounds. And overall, I was just totally kind of swept away by this storytelling experience. And I only have one critique or one knock against it. Don't worry, I won't give anything away. But I think the movie might overstay its welcome just a little bit. And there's a very clear and obvious emotional peak for the movie. And then it kind of does a reset with a new character and a new setting. And for my part, I feel like it's always tough to ask the audience to get to know a new major character and kind of a new chapter in a story very late in the game if they haven't already been teased or like kind of set up earlier in the movie. I would say like the last 10 or 15 minutes of the movie, like maybe the momentum slows just a bit and you're like, ooh, like what's going on here? Like you start to feel like an opportunity was missed to send the audience out of the theater at this huge, big emotional crescendo, because there are a few moments scattered throughout the film where we do reach these big emotional crescendos where the combination of the intoxicating imagery and just like lush photography combined with like the eerie, just bone-chilling music and all these incredible performances, they all come together and find these harmonies that are basically everything I look for in a movie when it comes to that kind of aesthetic stimulation that gets my blood flowing. And without even thinking about it, I know this movie will definitely be in my top 5 of the year, but I think after I revisit it, it has a very good chance of being my number 1 favorite movie of the year. And I think hands down it's definitely going to be the best movie that I see at the New York Film Festival this year. And I've seen a lot of good movies already by a lot of good filmmakers. I mean, I saw the latest movie by Hayao Miyazaki, saw the latest Errol Morris film, the latest Todd Haynes film, the latest Pedro Almodovar. I saw the winner of the Palme d'Or, Anatomy of a Fall, and I saw the latest flick by Jonathan Glazer. And I still have Michael Mann on deck. I still got Richard Linklater on deck. What else do I still have coming? I got the new Bradley Cooper Maestro. I've got the latest Harmony Korine. I mean, there are a lot of good films that are kind of potentially like push Poor Things aside, but all those movies have a very tough job in front of them because I think Poor Things, this is the movie to beat when it comes to presenting the audience with just a completely, totally original experience and unlike anything that they've seen before. And I think a lot of that boils down to the photographic style as well as the production design. They had 2 production designers on this movie, and their work was cut out for them because this is a world of pure artifice. It's a soundstage-bound creation where they have to invent everything from scratch. Every building, every ship, every ocean, every city, it all comes from their imagination. And I love these kinds of movies. It reminds me quite a bit of some of the creations by the filmmakers Powell and Pressburger from the 1940s, where they lean all the way into the human imagination. And photographically, the movie is juggling all these flaming batons where we have all these incredible sequences with this wide-angle lens that's so extreme that makes the entire image look like a fishbowl, where like if characters are walking down the street will kind of bend and contort throughout the frame of film. And then we have all the stunning black and white imagery, but also intoxicating colors. I mean, it's a very heady brew in terms of the visual stimulation, and there's so much incredible detail to this world, and it's so unusual. And like I said before, there's some ingredients to it that are deeply unsettling. Like the mad scientist character played by Willem Dafoe, he's a very kind, benevolent figure in a lot of ways, but he's also a monster, and he's had horrible things done to him by his father, and he's doing horrible things to women and to animals. But in a weird way, like you don't ever find yourself kind of like pushing away, like, oh my God, like you are doing like unholy acts in your lab. And I don't know how they managed to kind of walk that tightrope. Or who knows, maybe I'm different. Maybe some people watch this movie like he is the absolute villain of the film, but I don't interpret the film that way at all, because there's just so much genuine, sincere love between the characters played by Emma Stone and Willem Dafoe. I think a lot of people are going to find that the most endearing part of the entire film, because in comparison to most of the other men in the movie, Willem Dafoe is very kind and benevolent. I mean, the character played by Mark Ruffalo is just astonishingly funny. He has the world's worst English accent, which kind of helps enhance the comedy, because he's this sleazy sexual adventurer who basically wants to take her off to Portugal and show her all the sin and vice that this world has to offer. And oh my God, like the scenes between Emma Stone and Mark Ruffalo, I mean, I was holding my side, I was laughing so hard. There's a dance scene that makes the dance scene in Yorgos Lanthimos' earlier movie, The Favorite, seem very tame by comparison. And I thought The Favorite had the weirdest dance scene of the 21st century. The dance scene here, I mean, people are going to be shitting their pants with laughter when they see it. But I must admit, I don't think everybody's going to laugh at this movie, because I can remember distinctly sitting beside somebody where I didn't hear them even chuckle once the entire movie. And admittedly, when you're talking about press screenings, you get a lot of people that tend to be a little overly serious or take their opinions very seriously, as most people who comment on movies tend to do. But I was kind of caught off guard by just how kind of stiff and unyielding and like how unrelaxed they seemed to be when this movie was presenting us with this cornucopia of comedic and sexual delights. I mean, I cannot emphasize this enough. There is tons and tons and tons of nudity in this movie. This is a movie of unbridled sexuality. You're going to see a lot of women naked, you're going to see a lot of men naked, and you're going to see them doing all kinds of sexual acts that some will generate laughter, some will generate genuine feelings of disgust, but sex is a weird thing where sex is a lot like food, where you never quite know what people are going to be into, but I feel like no matter what your sexual preferences might be, at some point you're going to see a scene, you're like, all right, like, now we're talking. So my hat's off to Emma Stone for playing this role, because I think it took balls of steel to accept the role. I mean, she and Yorgos Lanthimos were making The Favorite when he came to her with the book and was like, I think this is something that we can work on together. And she very much was involved in the production. She's a producer on the film. And I think that shows amazing taste on her part, where she's like, you know what? I could easily do Cruella movies for Disney for the rest of my life and make piles and piles of cash. Or every once in a while, I could find one of the most interesting directors in the world and go out on a limb, take a real creative risk. A movie where it could have very easily exploded in her face and been a movie that's horribly embarrassing and that everybody just wants to forget about. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if during award season next year, if a few statues or a few awards are coming Emma's way, because people are going to be blown away by her performance in this. There's something incredibly infectious about the intellectual curiosity of Emma Stone here, where it's not based in any sort of like political ideology or religious faith or any sort of background. She's a complete and total blank slate. And she's just hurling herself into this deranged world where she wants to experience all of it. She wants to consume all of it. She wants to feel all of it. And it just reminds you, like, life is for the living. Life is for the taking. Like, fortune favors the bold. Like, go out and fucking do shit and just hurl yourself into it. And I feel like Emma Stone completely, totally hurled herself into this role with like complete and total fearless abandon, tons of courage, tons of vulnerability, and actors can wait around for decades for roles like this, and who knows, this might end up being the best role of her career. And I suspect that a lot of her peers and rivals are going to be fiercely jealous when they see this, because they're going to be jealous of the material, they're going to be jealous of the filmmaker, they're going to be jealous of her courage, while at the same time, they'll go off and do some stupid Marvel movie, a movie that requires absolutely no risk of any kind. But nothing risked, nothing gained. I think that's the expression. Nothing risked, nothing gained. In any event, you have to, in the world of filmmaking, financially and creatively, you have to embrace enormous amounts of risk in order to end up with a movie like Poor Things. But before I wrap up, I have to offer one final observation that does require me to divulge a spoiler of some kind. So if you don't want to hear any spoilers of any kind, bail out now. But I think the aspect of this movie that people are going to find most disturbing is the early stuff, like in the lab run by Willem Dafoe, where you see different animals that have been combined, like dogs and ducks and things like that. And it's kind of cute and harmless, but at the same time, like, but wait a second, like that's kind of fucked up, et cetera and so forth. But the tone of the film doesn't really allow us to kind of dwell on it and like get outraged or get mad. But the part that's deeply disturbing is how Bella came to be, because Bella was an aristocratic woman who was pregnant, who decided to hurl herself from a bridge. That's how the movie starts. And then the body was found when it wasn't quite yet cold. It was dead, but not cold. And the mad scientist took the body, realized, oh, the baby in the womb is still alive. Its heart still beats. So he takes the brain from the baby and puts it in the mother, basically creating a being that is both her own mother and her own daughter all at once. So she's got the physical maturity of a beautiful woman, but she's got the naivete and ignorance of a newborn baby. And immediately men start falling in love with her. And this is where it gets into strange kind of off the beaten path terrain, because the whole movie is about guys wanting to have sex with her, but she's basically a child. And even the kindest, most innocent, most good-natured man in this movie, the character of Max, played by Rami Youssef, even he is lusting after her. So at a certain point you have to say, is this whole movie just wildly inappropriate? And I guess if you wanted to argue that it's not inappropriate, you could say, well, her mind in an almost supernatural way is evolving at such a rapid clip, and she's becoming this like I guess this incredibly wise, sophisticated creature so quickly that she's left her child behind. But I think some people are going to stop and think like, wait a second, this whole movie is totally fucked up. But I think part of the tightrope walk of this movie is that they managed to introduce this character in a way where, at least I'm only speaking from my own personal experiences, I was not reacting in shock and horror throughout, and the crowd was screaming with laughter. I mean, it was reacting in thunderous approval, except for the person beside me. So I'm just saying, some people are going to push back against this movie. There is going to be a debate. I think there's going to be an inevitable backlash against it, and I think that's totally fine. I don't mind a little bit of backlash to a movie when it takes a big risk. If anything, it shows you're actually attempting to do something new. You're actually trying to challenge the audience. And anytime there's universal agreement on any movie, usually those movies end up sucking. Like I feel like a little bit of backlash forces you to stop and really assess what you think about a movie and why, kind of get your ducks in a row so you can make a proper argument. And we must all question our assumptions. We must all question our positions. And I guess it remains to be seen what forms of backlash will this movie generate, because we live in such a strange time where people are so tribal and they get in their little entrenched camps and go to war with one another. A movie as provocative as this one, a movie as experimental as this one, is inevitably going to piss some people off. So I'm looking forward to a very heated, lively debate surrounding this movie come December, and I'll just sit back with my popcorn and watch the debate unfold, because the good news is a good movie was presented to us in the process, and in any given year, I feel like we're lucky if we get anywhere from like 5 to 10 really good movies. This is one of those flicks. In any event, that is all I can say without giving away big chunks of the movie. So maybe I'll come back in December and do more of like a deep dive into like the granular detail of the flick. But if you are unfamiliar with the movies of Yorgos Lanthimos, this will be a good place to start. But some of his movies that I still need to see, I need to see Canetta from 2005. I need to see Alps from 2011. But Dogtooth fucking rules. The Lobster, I like the first half more than the second half, but I really like The Lobster. Killing of a Sacred Deer is special. That's a really disturbing, fucked up movie, but really interesting. And The Favorite was absolutely delightful. So I think Yorgos Lanthimos is well on his way to accumulating an incredible filmography. And he's got tons of shorts to enjoy as well. He's got a film called Bleat or Bliat. That's also part of the New York Film Festival. I'm hoping I'll get a chance to see it over the course of the festival. But this is a strong contender for one of the best movies of the year. I highly recommend it, and I look forward to hearing what everybody has to say about it in a few short months. But that's all I've got to say for now. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell, and leaving some recommendations down below if you've seen some of Yorgos Lanthimos' early Greek movies. But thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.